The DIESOL podcast.
Digital integration in English as a second or other language.
Episode 43, Summer of Samr.
Welcome to DIESOL. This is episode 43. We are your hosts. I am Brent Warner.
And I'm Ixchell Reyes.
Ixchell, are you still eating right now? You're like,
I was chomping on some cucumbers right before this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
How are you doing?
Me. Pretty good. I just got back from visiting California for a very short but lovely 3-day weekend because it was Memorial Day, and we're into June by the time everyone's listening to this episode.
Right.
Yeah, so we're heading into summer.
That's right.
How about you? Are you all wrapped up with finals grading?
Oh my God, no. So the way our semester works is like the summer school starts immediately after the spring semester ends. So you still are grading by the time summer school starts, and it was a little bit of a wonky week one for summer school, but my students are great, and we'll be good quite soon. So that's okay.
Are you still teaching? Are you still distance teaching?
Yes. So we're teaching online still. In the fall, we'll be trying a little bit of hybrid work where it's like one day on, one day off type of thing. We just really don't know what students are actually going to do. Like, students say they're going to do one thing, but what they actually sign up for might be a little bit different than what they say they want to sign up for. So we'll be testing it out, and we'll be seeing what happens there. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad we're having these kind of conversations now instead of, we are week 42 into distance teaching.
Yeah. I mean, I'm fully vaxxed at this point. I've gone out. I've actually went into a restaurant recently, inside of a restaurant. That was my first time. I had to kind of rip off the Band-Aid and just force myself to do it, even though I wasn't comfortable really. But I was like, I think you kind of have to balance yourself out and say, like, hey, there's got to be a point where you actually do re-enter the world. And the math says that I'm safe at this point. I had COVID, of course, and then and now I'm fully vaxxed. So in theory, really low chances, better chances of me getting hit by a car. So, and I've never been hit by a car. So
yeah, no, good news, I think, on both our ends. And I'm looking to go, hopefully, I think we're reintegrating by the end of July. So that's going to happen soon for me.
Good.
And but it's good to see people out and about, and it's the same, trying to form a new habit of not wearing the mask.
Yeah. Well, I still do carry the mask around with me, and I put it on when I go to places. But yeah, well, it's good. It's summer, It's a beautiful day out today. We're kind of moving into summer and everything. And there's gonna be some conferences. Anything you're attending, by the way? Any conferences you're going to?
I'm still stuck in between being burnt out by all of the stuff out there, and I'm interested in a lot of stuff, but I just have not followed through.
You don't have
registering.
You don't have the juice. Yeah.
So right now it's like, you know what? Let's just play it by ear, and if something really calls me, then But no, I actually don't have anything. I was thinking about in just applying to Tesol, but right now I am burnt out.
That's fire. Yeah.
How about you? I know you're doing lots of workshops.
Yeah, I've got things going on. There are some workshops. I guess I'm presenting at ISTE, so that's kind of cool.
Yay.
I was also
did you share your news?
Yeah, we didn't talk about this. I am now blogging for Tesol, so on Edtech and ESL, so that's exciting. You can go check out the official Tesol blog, and you can go just look for my face with a giant beard, and and you'll be able to see me.
Yeah, no, that article's great. Actually, you and I are doing something. We're guest speakers in one of our interviewee, Wayna Lee's class next week at Pepperdine. So we'll be doing that for them. But I think that's about it for now.
Yeah.
we might be doing also like, I think we're also doing uh Tesol Puerto Rico PR.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I forgot completely about that. Tesol, Puerto Rico.
Yeah,
there
I knew
actually
that
are
there
quite
was
a few
something
things. Keep following us on Twitter. We'll tell you if if we've got things coming
Yeah.
up. There are quite a few things still coming. So, with that all said, we decided, Ixchell, we're going to talk a little bit about Samr and get into understanding this model of technology use. So let's jump right over to that. Summer of Samr.
Summer of Samr. Oh, so clever.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about Samr. First, we back in episodes 28 and 30, we talked about a couple of standards. So we talked about ISTE standards and we talked about tech standards from Tesol, and how we might apply those in the ESL setting. So today we're going to be talking about Samr, S-A-M-R, which is not a standard, but it's kind of a model or a framework. And Ixchell, what does Samr mean?
So Samr stands for substitution, augmentation, modification, and redefinition. There are 4 categories, and it's a framework developed by Dr. Ruben Puente-Dentor in 2006. So what is that, like 15 years ago? And it's a framework to show the effects of technology on teaching and learning. So I didn't hear about that till probably maybe 2013, 2014.
Yeah, that's kind of when it had a little boom going on. Like a lot of people were talking about it back then. But I will say, in the tech world, for sure, in the Q and the ISTE world and the Twitter teacher world, it was a big conversation, 6 years ago, 7 years ago, something like that. In the ESL world, crickets for the most part. We kind of talk about those types of things because ESL is better, I think, now in the last year than ever has been, but has not traditionally embraced a lot of technology. And so so the reason that we wanted to talk about it today was because now people are like, oh, wait a second. After the last year, they're seeing, hey, I can use some of this technology. I can, how am I thinking about these things? And so it was kind of a thought for us, even though it's not necessarily the freshest conversation for a lot of techie type of people. For a lot of the people in the ESL world, it's like, oh, okay, let me jump right into this and really understand how I'm implementing these things. So we thought we would talk about the 4 different kind of steps, and I want to clarify that there are different uses for each step, and that one is not really better than the other, because I think a problem with Samr when we talk about these 4 different quadrants, right? So you say S, as you mentioned, substitution, augmentation, modification, redefinition. All of those are how you might use technology in the classroom or with your students. And they're kind of, they're often talked about in terms of steps. So it's like the first one is substitution, then augmentation, and then modification, and then redefinition. But I think that is misleading to a lot of people, that your goal is always doing redefinition, when your goal should always be educating your students, I think, and doing the best way to get interaction and work out of your students. And then these are different possible areas that you might play around with it. So I built a little, I did a reversion of the graph that they kind of tend to show, and instead of putting it on a ladder, I put it on a quadrant, and then there's arrows pointing to each of them. We'll put them in the show notes, so if you want to see kind of how I think about it in terms of looking at Samr not as a single we're in one or we're in the other, but we are you can move around between different ones for different purposes.
Right. And I'm particularly interested in talking about this because if I don't have a framework, as a teacher, if I don't have some kind of framework, I might be using a tool willy-nilly and then call it tech integration, right? And so we look to other authorities or other experts in the field to make sure that we're properly using a tool and not misusing the student's time simply for the sake of trying some technology out there, which I think is the danger now, as you know, in the last year, you know, using a tool and calling it online teaching equals online learning. And then also to know, like, now that we're going back to the regular classroom, how is our approach going to change, and what framework, how are we going to think about these tools, and where can they best, if we need them, how can we use them to help our students reach their goal? So to confirm what I thought, there's an article by Iman Al-Khalidi, sorry if I'm not, my Arabic is rusty, from 2021, so it's fresh from this year, in which they examine teachers' beliefs on developing a digital pedagogical framework based on the Samr model for undergraduate English language learning. So this was like kind of a gold mine of an article. It explains what Samr is. But what they found in talking to these teachers of ELs is that, and I quote, "Unfortunately, no one of the teachers was able to provide a successful identification of the levels of the Samr model or any other model. This result does not go in line with the TESOL technology standards, particularly Standard 1, which states that language teachers demonstrate knowledge and skills in basic technological concepts and optional competence, meeting or exceeding TESOL technology standards for language learners in whatever situation they teach." Which is to say, teachers don't have a framework and are not familiar, and can't identify a framework. And then this article touched upon two or three other frameworks that I'd heard of 2 out of those 3, but not that 4th one. And so that's kind of an area where I feel language teachers need to be well versed on, so that we make the best decisions for our students.
That's right. So so that kind of reinforces what we're talking about, which is, you know, we still need to talk about this stuff, right?
Right.
Even if it's not, you know, in my mind, even though it's not the newest thing, it's not about the newest thing. It's about what's working and what helps teachers grow. And so as we step into this conversation, we'll get into a couple of articles and web resources that you can look at. But just to kind of clarify, as we're stepping forward, I want to kind of give a brief overview of Samr. And today we're only, in our depth, we're going to talk about S and A. But I would just want to briefly clarify the 4 steps. And so, or the 4, I just said steps are not good. The 4 levels, the 4 quadrants, we'll call it. So substitution, and we're going to use Google Docs in this brief one, right? Because the tool is not a level of Samr, right? The tool is not a quadrant. The tool is just the tool, and how you're using it is where it fits into the Samr model. So Google Docs, when we're talking about it as a substitution, Ixchell, you just say that's typing, right? Just using the word processor. So if you're saying, hey, the non-tech version is writing a paper, right, by hand, I guess, and the tech version is just going into Google Docs and typing it up, right?
Right. So the technology is a direct substitution for a non-technology tool, but the task isn't changed, and that tool does not alter the way that language learner is interacting with the task.
That's right. So then we have augmentation, and keeping Google Docs in mind, this would just be things that are enhancements to it. So it would be, you know, turning on spell check, turning on word count, having the grammar feature going on inside of there. So there are things that make it better, that the technology can make it better inside of there, but there's still enhancements to things, and they kind of separate S and A as kind of the enhancement area, whereas M and R become the total transition, you know, a bigger transformational change there. So so that's kind of A there. And then we move into M, right? And Ixchell, this would be something like using the collaboration tools inside of Google Docs.
Yeah, I think one thing to note here is that you're still using a technology to substitute a non-technology tool. You've modified the task, but now you are facilitating some kind of collaboration. So there's a lot more shared work that is happening, and so it's the M in modification.
Right. And then finally at the end is R, which is redefinition. This is where things get into the world where it's like, hey, this could never have existed without technology. And so you're looking at things like putting in multimedia embeds into your Google Docs, having out links to different resources on things that you've built inside of there, sharing them publicly so that people can look at them, and maybe even turning on the option for people, like just strangers out there in the world, to comment on them, all of these things that you can do.
Yeah, so here I think it's worth noting that the task has been significantly redesigned. And as you said, it's empowering language learners to create something that was not, you couldn't have thought of before. And that's, as you said, connecting a student to an actual global audience, which you couldn't have done without that tool.
That's right. So we're going to get into, today or later, we're going to get into S and A so that we can kind of look at a few examples of them in the ESL world and how teachers can think about them. And then in the future, we'll get into M and R. But there are a couple of articles. There's not a lot on ESL and Samr, but I wasn't surprised to find one from Tan Nguyen, who does all sorts of cool stuff. So Ixchell, I think actually I wasn't surprised. I didn't find it. You found it. But that was a pretty good article and quite clear with a couple of ideas.
Yeah, we'll put it in the show notes. It's from his Empowering ELL's blog, which I just think if you're new to Samr and you need like the quick and dirty, but also with examples, that's one to bookmark. So we'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah. And then
go ahead.
And then we're just so eager to talk about Samr.
I also wanted to include there's an interview with Ruben Puentedura on applying the Samr model, and it's kind of nice to put a face to the name to the person who designed this model. So that will also be in the show notes.
And then finally, I also found a page that's basically, I don't know what the source is originally. It's just inside of Google. It's a Google site that someone built for Samr for English, but it's really cool because it goes into ideas in terms of how each of the quadrants fits into given standards for basically for high school English courses. And so really like lots and lots of different examples for all sorts of different standards that they're trying to achieve. And so I would definitely recommend going in and looking at there to kind of get your head around these things. Because one thing I will say, Ixchell, that we were talking about in the pre-show is it's easy to get your head into like, is this S? Is this A? Is this M? Is this R? As compared to, okay, this is kind of an SA, or this is kind of an AM area, or this is kind of an MR area, because it really does kind of go on gradients, and it depends on the way you're thinking about things. It's not perfectly, okay, I'm only doing this, right? Or I'm only doing that. And so I think it's valuable that you might say, hey, I think this is an A, and I go, really, it's kind of more of an M, right? And then we can both be right about that in the conversation. And so it's more of a guide to help you integrate well with purpose, rather than to say like, hey, I must be perfectly doing this, otherwise I am failing as a teacher, or something like that, which we tend to get picky on ourselves when we see that there are these models or these frameworks for us to kind of live up to. And we had some good pre-show conversation, like we're like, well, what do you think about this? And I think that's really those are continue to be good and valuable conversations to have.
Absolutely.
Okay, so today we don't have any any new reviews, we do encourage and welcome you to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or any other podcast place. And of course, we still are giving away the pins if you want to get one. If you want some DIESOL swag for free, that's all you got to do is go drop us a line inside of the inside of Apple Podcasts, but we did find that we're listed on a list again, feedspot.com, top 10 ESL podcasts, and we made the list, which is cool. And then also we're the only ones that are really like a teacher focused one. The rest of them are like helping students or helping people who want to learn ESL or build their language skills. And this one is, we seem to be the only one that's really like a teacher focused one. So that was kind of exciting and nice to see. So we'll leave a link to that in the show notes as well.
Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at what S&A looks like. So just as a reminder, a tool is not any level of Samr. A tool can accomplish these steps depending on the goal of the activity. So for S in substitution, what it would look like in reading, it would be something like simply using a PDF. So now you've taken a digital version of whatever you're having students read, and it's just digital.
Yeah,
you're just substituting.
And let's take one tiny step back too, which is I think one way to recognize this is people always say, well, okay, S is, it's the no tech level, and it's like, no, it is still the tech level. So we're really saying like there's a nothing, there's a blank or a what would you call it, like an X level, which is just like, hey, the actual zero tech level would be writing on or having a printed out piece of paper, right?
Yeah.
And then the S level is putting a PDF online, as you're saying here.
Right.
Cool. So we did mention writing before, and S is pretty straightforward, so we'll move through it fairly quickly. But we did mention writing before, so if you're talking about Google Docs, it's just typing, right? You're just going in, typing on the computer. That's all the substitution level of writing is. It's just that you're using some level of technology to write. So that would be Google Docs.
And for listening, it would be something like listening to a YouTube lecture or a podcast episode.
Right, and again, that might be that might even be to the level where you're playing it in front of the class, right? So it's instead of you talking to the class, you might just be playing the video or playing the audio. And then speaking, I like this one, Ixchell, because your students brought it up to you saying like, hey, a voice recorder right in your phone. So
why don't we just use it?
Yeah. So instead of speaking, standing in front of the class and speaking, you might just record yourself talking into your phone at the lowest level and then having that recording available and playing it again later.
Right. So moving on to augmentation, and again, this is a tech tool substitution, but with an enhancement, some kind of improvement to the experience of the activity. In reading, that would look like reading something, but also having a dictionary function within the text. So you know how you highlight a word and up pops the definition or pronunciation, perhaps.
That's right. Yeah. And this is where things start to get a little foggy. I also think, it's not very far in, but it's like, wait a second, hold on a second. How is that not modification? If, all of a sudden you have a free dictionary popping up, it's like, well, I think it's kind of low level, just little changes. And so, yeah, I like the idea, dictionary, spell check, pronunciation checks, little things like that are inside of there that make the reading a little easier.
It's enhanced.
It's enhanced, but it's not a totally different experience, or it's not really making the student's experience more buy-in necessarily.
Right.
So with that, we've got, I said spell check. That's actually a writing thing. So writing, if you're talking about Google Docs, spell check would be something inside of there. Word count, the grammar checks, all of those types of things. So they're just little ways that help enhance and make that writing experience maybe a little better or maybe a little bit more successful for students as they're kind of stepping into the tools or, in my case, I have a lot of students that are using these for the first time, and they're like, oh, that's really helpful that this here is there as well, and I don't have to go, hey teacher, how do I spell this thing? When they see the little red squiggly line, they can just click on it and they can go, oh, augmentation is spelled with a AU, not just an AG or something like that.
Right. I have colleagues that are still like with word count.
Oh yeah.
They're like blown away that, it also counts the characters, and it also gives you a reading level, a reading scale, and all sorts of cool tools.
Wait, you mean your colleagues don't know that there's a word counter inside of the word processor?
And Google Docs.
Oh, I guess it's kind of hidden. It's not there on the bottom bar. So
yeah, no, it's not. It's You have
to go search for it.
Mm-hmm. But when you discover it, it's like, yes, I don't have to stick to Microsoft Word. So it's kind of like, it's like a hidden little surprise there. Yeah. For listening, this would be something like listening or watching a video with the captions on, and maybe perhaps you can change the speed of what you're listening to, slow it down or speed it up.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a big one that I like to show to my students, speed, like slowing down a podcast a little bit, and they're like, oh.
And I know that Netflix recently within the last year, added that function. It wasn't always there.
Really? Netflix?
But one of my students in Colombia told me, and I was like, what? I don't use Netflix in the classroom, but they do outside of the classroom. And then of course YouTube does have that, and sometimes students don't know that you can speed something up and slow it down. And it's in the little tiny hidden corner of your video. There's usually a little settings tool or a gear tool settings icon.
Yeah, the little cog.
And you can slow it down and speed it up.
Yeah, that's great. So then you might look at something like speaking, right? And if you're recording on your phone as the kind of the substitution, I would say that the augmentation might be like the next level is voice recording on an online platform, right? So that you can actually easily share it. The problem potentially with recording on your phone is, okay, I'm Android, I'm iPhone, here's the format that it's going to put it out on. How do I share that with my teacher and all of those things? And so now it's like, okay, we all have we're doing the same thing. We're recording ourselves, but it's kind of uniformed. It's kind of easy to do, get a quick link and make that accessible. So that might be a slightly improved version of augmentation. And so those are some things to think about. Now, Ixchell, before we kind of close up this little section here, I want to kind of clarify, we are just giving some examples, right? And so I don't want anyone listening to go, oh, okay, well, substitution and reading equals reading a PDF, right? That's all it is. It's like, well,
no, that's just one example.
Right. It's meant to be
what it looks like.
Yeah, meant to be a potential example, and there are lots of different ways. And as we mentioned before, any tool might be anywhere on that spectrum, right? Depending on the ways that you're using it and what parts of it you're implementing and all of those things. And so some tools could only be substitution, and some tools, might only
be in all three or all four.
Some of them could be all four, and some of them might really shine in the in the redefinition phase. But it's like, well, why bother even using it for the substitution phase, right? So there's lots of ways to kind of approach or to understand how these are fitting in or how these are serving your students. But you just want to recognize that all of these are potentially great for your students, right? Substitution can be excellent because, hey, we just want to read something. Here it is. Here's the PDF. Let's just read it, right? That's totally okay and encouraged, because reading is a huge and important skill at the very basic levels of it, right? And it's also encouraged to interact with things. It's also encouraged to build things more. And so in the future, in the summer of Samr, we will also be talking about M and R, and we'll be doing a bit more of a deep dive into those, because those are kind of the transformational levels. But all of this information is out there and available. We're just trying to hope to focus it in for, the TESOL world and people who are working with language learners a little bit.
Okay, so it is time for our fun finds.
Yay!
And this time around, I've been listening to a lot of music, new music. I'm not a Spotify person,
Mm.
but one of my friends, she only does Spotify. So I did find that you can get a lot of good suggestions on there. And you can make shared playlists and have like you can share your music and you can listen to the same playlist at the same time. So that's kind of cool. But that's not my fun find. My fun find is Paz, Paz.
Okay.
But I'm telling you that you can find her on Spotify because you couldn't find as many of her songs on Apple Music.
You're talking about Paz, not your friend who has a subscription to Spotify.
She has no subscription to Spotify.
Paz? Wait, who are you talking? Are you talking about your friend? Is Paz the musician? What do you mean?
Paz the musician. I was getting there.
Okay. I thought you were talking about your friend.
Roundabout, long-winded. No, I was getting to my friend introduced me to Spotify and introduced me to Paz.
Okay.
And she sings a lot of very calming music. And maybe some of you know that I'm a night owl and I struggle with sleeping. And this is a great way to wind down your evenings, or when you want to, if it's been a high energy day, this is a really good way to just play it in the background. So I didn't know Paz was really big in the meditation world, but I can see why.
Okay.
But her name is Paz. Paz.
Cool.
So
I want to check that out. So we both went for kind of music related choices. You went directly for an artist. I went for Louder Milk, which is actually a TV show written by one of the Farrelly brothers and starring Ron Livingston, who was, if you remember Office Space, he was the main character in Office Space. But anyways, it's a television show. It's a little bit brash in certain points, but it's pretty funny. It's basically about it's about recoverers, so addicts, and they're kind of addicts together, but the main character is an ex-music critic, and so if you grew up in a music world, you're kind of around our age roughly, so he's like talking all about these these great bands and albums and things like that at the same time as kind of he's now no longer really part of that world, which I associate with a lot because I was like younger. I was like all the music, and now I'm like I love it, but I don't really know what's going on nowadays very much. And so it's a fun show. It's well-intentioned, if a little rough around the edges sometime. And so I think it's available on, I want to say Amazon Prime. So Louder Milk, there's 3 seasons. I'm 1 season in, and I've been having some fun with it. So check it out.
thank you so much for listening to the show. You could win a one-of-a-kind DIESOL pin by leaving us a review on Apple Podcast. We're hoping that we'll get one soon. But if you're giving us a shout out any other way, please tag us on social media.
That's right. We're on Patreon at the $1, $3, and $6 level. We should put some stuff up on there for people, so that's okay. So Patreon's there if you want to support the show just for supporting its sake. If not, we love having you listen. We have paused a little bit on Clubhouse. So we've been doing it. We did it for a while. We liked it, but we're just kind of both at the end of our rope. It's like more time sitting in front of the computer screen and more time kind of prepping for those
just screens.
Yeah, screens. So many screens. It's like hard for a techie to go, we could go for some less screen time. But so we will go back to it, or we'll go back to that probably in the future. Maybe give us another month or so. We might just throw in some random ones, some non-timed ones. So either you could run one if you want to, or I could run it, or maybe we both are available at the same time, and we just do something random. But we're taking a temporary, potentially hiatus on the regularly scheduled Clubhouses. But I think we'll be back. I think we'll be sharing more again in the future.
For the show notes and other episodes, check out diesel.org/43, or you can also listen at voiceed.ca, or you can find us on Twitter. You can find the show at DieselPod. You can find me, Ixchell, at Ixie_Pixie. That's IXY_PIXY.
And you can find me at Brent G. Warner. In Yiddish, thank you is a dank. So, a dank for tuning in to the Diesel podcast. Everybody, bye.
Bye.